Here we are in the Sunken Gardens in Clovis, and we're talking with Professor Al Montesi of St. Louis University, who's come all this way to talk with us, the students, faculty, and staff of the Clovis branch of Eastern New Mexico University. I guess the best way to open up, Al, is to have you give us a capsule narration of your career. Introduce yourself to the people at large here.
Well, my roots are Italian-American. I come from an immigrant stock. My parents came to the United States in the 1890s, went through the famed Ellis Island, which is now converted into a museum, among millions of immigrants from Middle Europe, and they settled of all places in the American South. Now, my parents paid off their passage by working, well, on my mother's side at any rate, by working in a factory in Helena, Arkansas, which later became rather notorious, as I learned many years later, because it exploited these workers and somehow abused them and kept them for long periods of time for very little money that they had spent on their passage. So my roots are part of that whole immigrant sort of ethos, which is so much a part of the American scene, the attempt to somehow adjust to the environment, to the ambience of being an American in a very waspish society. As you remember at that time, the politicians wore almost swan swallow coats, and there was this tremendous emphasis on being a New Englander with a tremendous amount of English and obviously kind of a Protestant sort of. So my whole life in the American South was an attempt to define myself in both cultures. And what occurs here is that I became a marginal person. I had to finally deny my Italian roots to somehow become part of the Southern ambience. And the result was that the conflict, I think, at that particular instance, produced some of the poetry. Because I think we all seek self-definition or self-discovery or self-definement, and that it always comes down to who are you and where are you going and what is your particular lot in life and what is your meaning to yourself and to those around you. Well, I think that actually I found a voice partially as a teacher and partially as a poet. Now, as a teacher, I'm sentimental, and I'm not very unhappy about being sentimental. I would rather be sentimental than avaricious or greedy, because I think, basically in a very simplistic way, I think the more that you give, the more that you get. And that I am honored, because I was programmed, I suppose, to be a Catholic, where Catholics are programmed to do what they can for the human condition. I was honored to be able to feel this way. I was not negative or cynical or self sort of aggressive in terms of I was not monomaniacally in love with success for its own sake, but also for the people around me. I think this is a gift that my parents gave me, that they showered love on me, and I wanted to somehow. Now this sounds very, very saccharine sweet, but really, basically, this is the kind of world that I've functioned out of. My mothers and dad were so wonderful to me that I wanted to somehow spread their particular kind of affection. Now you say, Montesi, this sounds like gush. Well, actually, what do you want me to say? That I am just a very, very staid, proper, rigid kind of academic that's interested in my own particular speciality and not in people? I think what actually occurs in my life world is that I've been made happy by the fact that I've worked with people and I've had stunning success with my students because simply of my personality. I am a personality teacher. I am a showbiz teacher. I can dramatize. I can simply make a great fool out of myself. I can do all these things, but I'm never dull. So they say, well, Al, you're a legend in your own time and you're charismatic and all that bull. Those are not my remarks, they are their remarks. My students have served in President Carter's cabinet. They have, as conservationists, they've had profiles in the New Yorker. There are novelists, there are poets, there are screenmakers. One of my students, Tom Hadaller, has won an Academy Award for Best Boy, which was the documentary he did with Ira Wolf. And I've had studying success with people, not because of any staid academic role, but the fact that I extended my particular kind of affection beyond the rigidity of a costume professor. That is, what I'm dealing with is potential people to know that if you're really, what literature I think really teaches you, and I'm going to talk about this tonight, is that you're involved in a creative endeavor. That when you see something excellent, you want to reproduce it yourself, you see. And you communicate this to your students. And so it's a kind of a chain reaction thing. You say, I'm in love with beauty. Okay, that sounds narcissistic, doesn't it? And it sounds rather effete. But I am genuinely in love with beauty. I don't give a damn what you're in love with. A dollar bill or a bank account or the big board in New York or the stock exchange in Japan. I happen to love beauty. And I'd like to somehow expose enough of my students and enough of my audience to that kind of love. And those are the things I do as a teacher. Now, as a poet, the kind of poet I am is more of a public poet, where I address certain sort of problems that occur in the marketplace, as well as psychological, in a real sense. I'm more of a sociological poet than I am of a psychological or a private poet. I mean, I try to deal, certainly I deal with these moments when I, as an individual, am experiencing sensation or some sense of my own kind of psyche in a strange and bewildering world. That, I think, is what most poets try to do. But I am, in a sense, quite aware that cultural problems have to be addressed in poetry. And even though poetry is the orphan of all arts, somehow, some of these, no voice is really wholly lost. And some of these things are communicated. Because the function of literature is to better the society, to better men, to reach towards a more perfect society, to reach to a more... So it challenges the status quo, and by no means am I a status quo. And I think that this is what my students, I think through the years, have found valuable in me, that I always wanted to push the boundaries forward and to push them forward with it. Is that satisfactory?